Hello everyone! Today we will be discussing the historical significance of the Tankman photograph shot by Jeff Widener on June 5th, 1989. And that's Jeff on the left, featured next to his friend Liu Qiangxiang in front of the Forbidden Palace in Beijing. That's actually down the street from the Tiananmen Square where the Tankman photograph was shot. There's me, your presenter, Marissa Hodson. So the camera that took this picture was a Nikon FE2 on Fuji 100 ISO color negative film. And since China was utilizing heavy censorship, Widener actually had to smuggle his film in. But since he also used all of the film he smuggled in the night before in the Tiananmen Square massacre, his friend Liu Qiangxiang actually had to scrounge around the hotel where the photograph was taken, where thankfully a hotel resident was polite enough to give them film. And we see the historical significance as it exposes the militaristic abuse on the protesting civilians in China that were begging for a little leeway of democracy. And the controversy definitely stems from the opposing views of the communist versus the Democrats that are arguing for either political stance. But either way, less than a month after the picture was published, the United States voted to impose economic sanctions against China, citing the human rights violations. We can definitely see the militaristic abuse in this even single picture with just one tank against one man that is outmatched by armor and artillery, as this man's armed with groceries. So then we see the escalation of 4 tanks, which is the picture by Widener, and even further to 6 tanks, on to at least 8 tanks, with him still at the bottom left from a different point of view. And CNN got a video that depicts the tanks driving up the city street where cars and buses are usually. We can see a bus right there on the left. And as they cruise in, there's about 13 that I can see from this one frame. You can maybe count more. As they all drive up, leading into this man halting them in the middle of the sidewalk. So we see the motive and backstories stemming from the Chinese Communist Party, who responded to the protesters' cries for political reform with bloody and military force. And Widener's initial pursuit started with obtaining a story for the Associated Press, where he worked as the Southeast Asia picture editor. And he initially was reporting on the pro-democratic protesters that had been ramping up in their coverage the days prior. And New York even had to send him to Beijing, even though it was outside his domain, because they knew they had to get a story on this and tell people of the world the information that they wouldn't be able to see otherwise due to China's censory laws. So the Tankman photograph also ultimately reveals more than a censored statistic than anyone could read about in a newspaper, as Widener did before taking this picture. And since 1989, we can see that 3,200 words referencing the massacre were suppressed in China's history. And on the 30th anniversary, the Tiananmen massacre was honored across the years for those who have struggled standing up to power and advancing in law, maybe even freedom of expression and religious freedoms in China. Of the era, the same year, the Berlin Wall fell that November, and they both feature revolts against a controlling government. And in the picture depicted by Lionel Cironio of the Associated Press, we can see 4 soldiers looking down on the wall of the destruction of the rioters at the bottom right. And in this second picture by Carol Guzzi of the Washington Post, we see people even sitting on top of the wall, celebrating that the wall is being broken down even into segments. And some other works by Widener's include all kinds of different genres, but the style I would say is the same, as he captures split-second occurrences that wouldn't be able to even be remembered maybe in those moments, but because he captured them, now can resonate with people forever. We can see from his collection of the the Tiananmen uprising, we have this picture, the fight for democracy, looking a lot like the picture from the previous slide of the Berlin Wall, where the people were raising their hands celebrating that the wall has been fallen, as this tank has clearly fallen down from the hands of the officials trying to use it. And we move on to this picture where this woman is being forced around by a bunch of males around her, a lot of men in army suits, and this is the China struggle. And we see the poverty of being occupied in Beijing. And moving on to the war and conflicts. The celebrities. We see Sylvester Stallone. Just important people that need to be represented in the media at the time. And then we see eyes from Cambodia representing what was the war and conflicts. And moving on to Buddhist buddies, depicting 4 Buddhist boys on a little bus ride. That represents the Thailand genre that he has, and the newspaper pictures as well, depicting a differing view, a very dramatic scene. The message stems from an ordinary man being represented for the stakes that are greater than his own life. And lastly, we see the symbols of one man wearing white, symbolically personifying a pure movement against 4 war machines with camouflage war paint. And instead of taking a picture of the 12 or 13 tanks that were far away, Widener gives a close-up and intimate view for the viewer, and it bears a little bit of an unsettling personal level for the viewer, who is forced to imagine the outcome for the man and is now a part of it, as the guns are even pointed at not only the man but also you as the viewer. And it makes people forced to contemplate the dictatorial and inhumane actions by the communist government in China during this time. And here is my works cited.